So I'm going to walk you through the genetics lab. We've ordinarily, when we do the genetics lab in the lab, it's a big discussion lab. I try as much as I can to get answers out of people, which is always a lot of fun. And we can't really do that this way, so I'm going to have to just kind of walk you through the bits and pieces of it. Also, this is where I usually give you the deep background on Mendel, the guy who worked with the pea plants, but that's being integrated into the lectures for the remote stuff, so hopefully you'll have heard about Mendel before you start watching this. The labs are not as useful to you, and you aren't going to understand as much if you're not keeping up with the lectures. So, part one has to do with the basic things that Mendel worked out and how you write them down and how they all work together. Just as a little bit of background, now he discovered that there were different determinants for certain traits. Trait for pea plant height, there were determinants that gave you tall and determinants that gave you short, determinants that gave you purple flowers and ones that gave you white flowers. And he found out that those determinants, which he called alleles for the genes that made the traits, that every pea plant had two alleles. And if they had a mixture, one of purple and one of white, then it would make it purple. If it had one tall and one short, it would make it tall. And he determined that if one of them could hide that the other one was there, he would call that a dominant allele and a recessive allele. Now, what we know now is that in most cases, the recessive allele is a DNA code for a protein that either doesn't work or it works very badly. In the case of flowers, the base color of a pea plant flower is white. If you have a non-working pigment coloring protein, then it stays white. Whereas if you have one code that says purple, produce purple, you get a purple flower. The tall short is actually a gene for growth hormone in plants. And if you have a non-working, then your plants don't grow to a regular height. They're short. If you have one working or two codes for working proteins, you get a normal height plant. And so his tall and short were actually normal and stunted. And all he needed was one working code, one working protein in order to get the trait to work the way it was supposed to. Produce purple flowers, produce normal height plants. A whole bunch of other mixtures that we'll talk about in the lab. But here, he also figured out, how do you write this stuff down? And how exactly did he figure out how it worked? So in the first question, we have two, we're going to use dominant recessive traits in people. Two people that each show the dominant trait. The trait that we're going to pick is eye color. Now, I don't know if you can see this on the screen, but my eyes are blue. So are yours. No matter what color your eyes are, that blue layer is under on everybody's eyes. That's why a lot of animals are born, or babies are born, with what look like blue eyes and then they change color, is that the gene for the pigment that's going to cover over the blue is expressed. Now, the best I've got is a light gray pigment. So my blue shows through. A lot of people's blue shows through. But any kind of allele for a dark pigment is going to paint over the blue and cover it. So brown, or in some cases black, which is a really dark brown, will cover the blue. So we consider brown to be dominant and blue to be recessive. And it's one of those things where you don't really have a working cover pigment for the recessive. Now there's middle range colors that, just like mixing paints, they don't always, one doesn't always cover and the other one isn't always hidden. But we're going to focus on the two extremes, the blue where the underlayer shows through and the brown where it's dark enough to cover. And one of the nice things about that is they both start with the letter B. So if we have two people that both show the brown allele, two people, so one person and another person, The only way they got brown eyes is if they each have a brown allele. Duh, can't have brown without brown. But everybody's got pairs, and now the question is, what's the other allele in the pair? Now, of course, it could be a brown and another brown. We just talked about how a brown can hide the presence of a blue, so it could be a brown, a dominant brown hiding a recessive blue. Now, Mendel came up with this idea of the dominant ones getting capital letters. If you could connect them to the name of the trait, that was great, but eventually you run out of letters for that. And the recessive is lowercase letters. So this is a brown allele and this is a blue allele. Now, you can't have two blues and have brown eyes, because where'd the brown come from? But there is another mixture. Here, both parents have the same mixture. Well, they don't need to have the same mixture. Now, this is part of the answer to the first question. The rest of the question is, what can you get in the offspring? And you can only send one of any pair onto your offspring. But here, the offspring are getting brown or brown to mix with brown or brown. Now, I always have to warn people, in the real world, genetics is way more complicated than this. Like, there's a ton of different brown alleles, everything from legitimate black up to a tan that's so light that it isn't really dominant, isn't dark enough to cover things up. But, so these people could have different color brown eyes and they could be producing different mixes of brown in the kids. We're ignoring that. We're just sticking with dark and underlayer really here. I'm gonna go to the next least complicated mixture. The kids from this mixture are gonna get brown or brown. And from this mixture, they're gonna get brown or blue. Here's the thing. The dominant comes to do with what the proteins do that you're coding for. The codes are not dominant. So these are equally likely, is that it's 50-50 whether you get a brown or a blue. Now it's true, all you got over here is brown eyes. So yeah, this mixture is gonna produce brown-eyed kids, but half of the time there's gonna be a hidden recessive in the kids. So now we come up here and it gets tricky. It gets so tricky that I'm gonna put an additional notation in here. You don't need to do this when you're writing out the answer, but I'm gonna do this because I wanna show you something. I'm gonna number these. You can get two browns together from this mix, the first brown and the second brown. That's the only way you get two browns. You can get two recessives together, the first one and the second one. That's the only way you get two recessives, but you can get blue eyes out of this mixture. And you can get a brown and a blue again. And you're wondering, why did he say that, write that twice? It's because you could have gotten the first brown with the second blue, but you could also have gotten the second brown with the first blue. At one point, Mendel, when he realized that an allele was hiding the other allele and he wanted to know what was going on, he started to breed his hybrids, looking to see if the hidden allele would reappear. And what he found was it reappeared a quarter of the time. That's how he figured out he was dealing with pairs. And because that's how you get 1 out of 4 mixtures where the hidden trait reappears. And so I wanted to show you that you get 2 different mixtures to get this brown and blue back. That all is the answer for question 1. 2 parents showing the dominance. Question 2, 2 parents showing the recessive. Now I have blue eyes. I gotta have a blue, and I can't have a brown, can I? If I had a brown, I'd have brown eyes. So if I have a pair of alleles, and I'm showing the recessive trait, they gotta both be blue. Yeah, one of them could be gray, but we're ignoring that. So if we have 2 parents both with blue eyes, then that's all you got. Now in the real world, there's more to it than this. is I once had a student with very dark brown eyes tell me both her parents were blue-eyed, and tell you the truth, the odds are she was adopted and didn't know it. But we talk about the colors, but the colors don't get there all by themselves. There's processors that make the colors and deposit the colors and make sure. If you have an albino, one of their processors, they have two bad alleles and two bad processors that get the colors where they're supposed to go in the eyes, in the hair, and in the skin. That's why one mutation, one pair of bad alleles affects color in a bunch of different systems, where your skin color genes are different than your eye color genes, or different than your hair color genes, but they all depend on that one processor. And you have processors that only work in your eyes and processors that only work in your skin. See, it gets complicated. You don't need to know that stuff, but sometimes people learn these simple rules, and when it doesn't work that way in the real world, they get really upset and they go, well, the rules are the rules. Is, where'd this kid come from? Is that the eye colors don't work. Now, there's more to it than that. It gets more complicated. Anyway, two brown-eyed people can have a blue-eyed kid according to the rules. Two blue-eyed people not supposed to have a brown-eyed kid according to the rules. Does it happen? Yeah, it happens. The last thing is the only combination left. We've got a parent showing the brown and a parent only showing the blue. So the blue-eyed parent, we know, just has the two blue eyes, the two blue alleles. And the brown-eyed parent could have a second brown, but also could have a hidden blue. Now here's where genetics can get really confusing, because when you look at them, it looks like the same mix, brown-eyed and blue-eyed. But if the mix is this, every kid gets a brown hiding a blue, so they all have brown eyes. If the mix is this, then only half of the kids get the brown, half of them get the blue, they all get the blue from the other parent. So half of them have brown eyes and half of them have blue eyes, roughly, you know how flipping a coin works. Statistically, it should be 50-50. And that can be confusing sometimes. Sometimes when you do the numbers right, they don't feel like they should be right. And that happens sometimes later in this lab. So this all leads into the last question in part one, which is you meet these two people, they both have brown eyes, but you look at their kid. I gotta do this, I'll explain that in a second. You meet their kid and the kid's got blue eyes, and it's not a kid from a first marriage and there's been no hanky-panky, no fooling around. It's their kid. I gotta do this because I mentioned before that underlayer, the blue underlayer, often is there when a baby is born. Some browns are expressed as fetuses and they come out with brown eyes. Some browns are actually a type of brown that needs exposure to light, that literally has to tan in order to turn brown. So there's a lot of blue-eyed infants that turn out to be brown-eyed kids. This kid is too old for that. Definitely has blue eyes. And all I need you to do is explain the genetics, which, here's the surprise, is one of the mixtures you just dealt with. So just tell me what the alleles are, show me what's going on with the kid, genetically. And so that's part one.